Piers, if I can go to you in London, if you were in Copenhagen right now, what would you tell the 110 world leaders that are going to be that are there right now? What would you advise them to do, since you're so skeptical about all of this?
Sure. I would say what we need is evidence-based science and policy, and we have neither. The developing world needs cheap electricity, which generally means coal-fired electricity. They do not need wind farms and solar cells. Those are just scams created by the West to make money. What to do about actual climate change? Because there is real climate change. It's natural. It's nothing, I repeat, whatsoever to do with man's carbon dioxide. But there is natural climate change. And what we need to do is, for example, forecast long-range extreme weather events, which we can do using solar activity, and the world ought to prepare for these things better. For example, the floods in Sri Lanka around the 18th of November, we predicted those storms, and nothing was done to prepare for them. Bjorn, now, if these people at Copenhagen really care, they would do things to prepare for real damage caused by nature, instead of these games which are designed to make money for the companies like Tata, which Mr. Pachauri in fact works for.
Well, Bjorn, that brings up a very interesting point. Well, I'd go to Bjorn here. I mean, a lot of people are skeptical about this. This is a money-making process for alternative energy and companies like this. I mean, there is that skeptical part, and even I will be saying, you know, at least I give it a hear, because it's not really a scientific issue, it's a commodity issue. Go ahead, Bjorn.
Well, and absolutely, what we need to do is make smarter moves, because the policies that we've certainly done so far haven't worked. And I would agree with Piers that we should definitely be focusing on making sure that we deal with the vulnerability of many communities, both to natural and to climate-induced problems. So clearly make sure you deal with the very simple problems of flooding. They're happening right now. Most of them are not climate-induced. Probably more of them will be climate-induced, but fundamentally we need to ensure that communities are safe from flooding. Likewise with drought, likewise with access to clean drinking water and all the other things. So that's one part of it where we have to be much smarter with how we spend the money. I do also believe, as Michael pointed out, we do need to move to a low carbon and essentially zero carbon emission energy economy towards the end of the century. But how do we do that? We don't do it by making grand promises. We do it by investing dramatically more in research and development into clean energy, because only when we have the technology, then we can make the promises come true. Let's make cheap, or hopefully cheaper than fossil fuel, solar cells, windmills, all the other things by 2040, 2050. Then we can get everybody, including the Chinese and the Indians, to buy them.
Okay, Michael, I noticed that you wanted to jump in there at one point.
Well, two things. On solar, we have satellite observations of solar variation. It's rather small. If those small variations are causing the changes that Piers is talking about, many of us don't think so, but if they are causing that, then the much bigger change in atmospheric radiation and energy caused by CO2 and the greenhouse gases would be causing these large effects. I agree with Bjorn that we need a much stronger research program. There's no question about that, but we also need the incentive to get doing that. And we need the external costs that we're having from these fossil fuel emissions sort of included in the cost of their, of the fuels and of the energy from that. And if we do that, we'll then be moving toward, we'll have the incentive to move toward these other alternative technologies, and it'll provide many benefits, not just to climate, but with respect to, in the U.S., to energy security and to jobs and a whole bunch of things. So there are a whole bunch of reasons to actually shift off of the carbon system that we're on.
Piers, go ahead. I mean, is this the right direction to go?
Well,
what Bjorn had to say and what Michael had to say. Go ahead. Go ahead. What's the right direction?
First of all, on jobs, on jobs, the carbon trading is not creating security of jobs. It's losing jobs in the north of England as we speak. Now, in terms of solar variations, Michael, you say you feel. Well, I tell you, we know solar variations are the key things, particle and magnetic variations, which control the weather, and we use those to predict many months ahead extreme events all over the world. CO2 can't do that. There is also incontrovertible evidence, and you can get it on many websites, that shows there is a close correlation between solar activity, magnetic activity, and world temperatures. And there is no evidence, I repeat, no evidence, which shows that CO2 drives world temperatures. And if you have some,
that's not what the National Academies of the World say,
and lastly, because the science is questioned, lastly, because the neutrality of the IPCC is questioned, don't you think that Dr. Pachauri should resign, given that he is funded by Tata Engineering, Tata Steel, who are making millions out of closing down jobs in the name of climate change?
Go ahead.
Should he resign?
Go ahead, Michael. I guess there's a question to you.
Apart from the fact he's a railway engineer, and there's nothing wrong with that, because engineers can give excellent analysis, but his position is compromised, I think. Do you think his position is compromised?
Well, Michael, this looks like we're getting into the intricacies of the debate here. I'd like to ask a very general question of everyone, and I know we have scientists here, and we have an activist and a skeptic like Bjorn, but I mean, in Copenhagen, a lot of people are just asking the simple question: who's going to pay for all of this? That is a really big issue. And the Chinese and developing countries have brought that up. Since you're in Copenhagen, Bjorn, what's the sense there? The clock is running out.
Well, that's true, but also very clearly, everybody wants everyone else to pay. That's not a new thing. We have that whenever we go to the restaurant, too, and have to share the bill. But the real point, of course, is to remember that the kinds of amounts that I think many developing countries are hoping to come out of this. I think many developing countries are essentially seeing this as a honeypot. They were talking about $2,500 billion a year from the developed world. Of course, that's not going to happen. They were hoping for hundreds of billions of dollars. Chances are that they might get 10 or maybe even tens of billions of dollars. So literally, we're not willing to spend all that much. And of course, that underscores the fundamental point. When you ask people, we had a survey from Russia. I don't know what the numbers would be there, but when we've asked in other countries, if we say to people, are you worried about global warming? They generally say yes. And then we say, are you willing to pay, say, $10 or $15 to avoid it? They say yes. If you say 20 or 20 or 25, they start wavering, and 50, they don't want to do it.
But what's one thing that's very, very interesting to me is that when the banking system in the U.S. and the U.K. needed money, they got $1.1 trillion in a few weeks. It doesn't seem the same commitment is being made to the environment. Many thanks to our guests today, Bjorn Lomborg, Piers Corbyn, and Michael McCracken. And thanks for our viewers for watching us here on RT. Stay in touch, and I'll see you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.